Hello there and welcome to Wrong Ways Colombia Cast with me, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. Now, a few months back on the podcast, we spoke with Colombian visa consultant Camilo Trujillo in a bid to get answers to some of the many questions visa applicants had about the changed process in these coronavirus times. If anything, it could be said it's even more complicated now than it was back then, especially considering the grace period for those in visa limbo land that had been in place is now more or less over. Time is ticking again. So Camilo has kindly agreed to come back to us to answer a whole host of new questions we have for him. Welcome back, Camilo, this time in video format for those watching the YouTube version. That is, and it looks like you're coming from cell number 13 in whatever prison in the south of Bogota.
It's been kind of like that, but thankfully, I mean,
well, you're looking well, and I'm glad you did your makeup for the video and all that. Excellent. But anyway, let's get straight into this because there's a lot of stuff to cover, and I know there's a lot of confusion out there. So let's start with what seems to be the most pressing matter. What's the situation for those whose visas or tourism passes as well are coming to an end or have already ended, but they're still here in Colombia? What do they have to do, and what are their options?
Well, that really depends. I mean, the first thing that we have to take a look into is the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or as we know about it, Cancillería, or Cancillería for many, for many of the gringos already living in Colombia, has never really stopped accepting applications. I mean, of course, the concept of the application is up to them, but aside from that, they have never really stopped accepting applications. And they actually did say this on the 1296 decree that came by on once the pandemic started. They did mention and they did say that if your visa expired during the pandemic, you still had to renew it. It wouldn't exclude you from that. So in that sense, for those whose visa actually expired, and they allowed it to expire, I'm sorry to tell you, but your continuity has actually been breached. And in that sense, you need to get a visa before October 21st, but you are no longer available, for example, in matters of time, for your residence, should that have happened.
Yeah, so that's people who had, just to clarify, that's people who had 5 consecutive visas and would have been in a position to apply for residency.
Well, not so many visas as years. Yes.
Years,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, because we're talking, for example, a migrant visa could be granted for 3 years, then again granted for another 2 or 3 years. So in that sense, yes, if you did not have a gap between that time and you were actually available for residence, but your residence did not get approved before your visa expired, then your continuity is breached.
Okay.
Now, in the sense of those whose visa expired during the pandemic, they haven't renewed it, and, you know, aside from all the residence and continuity years and time and so on. First of all, well, you either need to renew your visa or get another kind of visa before October 21st, or on that end, get a waiver, salvoconducto, before that time.
But is that, Camilo, beginning the process? Because as far as I'm aware, if you go on to Migración, because at the moment they're operating at 30% capacity, their offices are with staff, and they have a backlog of 6 months, Migración, because I think it's important to clarify, we've got 2 different entities here. La Cancillería, as you mentioned, deal with the visas. Migración deals with your salvoconductos are also then registering a visa that's been approved, and then the next step, it's the same kind of side of, the other side of the same coin, getting your cédula. So that's another entity. Migración had closed shop for 6 months. So they opened up again on the 21st of September, as we talked about, and there's this month. But for example, if Brendan Corrigan is looking for a salvoconducto and he goes online to book an appointment, because it's by appointment only officially, and he can't get an appointment before the 21st of October, what does he do?
Well, I mean, there have been 2 options, and Migración has been constantly actually been updating information to their website to be able to actually address all these many gaps that have been happening. For example, there's no clear information of by when you have to register your visa. And for those, of course, I mean, I'm going to put this in layman's terms. is registering your visa is requesting your ID, your cédula de extranjería. So
Somebody interrupting there.
yes, of course. I mean, one of the many things. So
You're a
anyway,
busy man, Camilo. You're a busy man. That's fine.
I know. So anyway, in this sense, when it matters, in matters of, for example, registering your visa or requesting your cédula de extranjería, um, you have to do this within 15 days while being in Colombia of the approval of your visa. I mean, if you're entering Colombia, there's a whole bunch of a different scenario, but I don't want to go into it because I know our time is limited. You have 15 days to do so. This area hasn't really been clear. It's still in a gray area within Migración Colombia. If you don't do it within 15 days, then of course your visa, you're probably going to get penalized. So this gray area hasn't been talked about. In matters of the salvoconducto and the waivers, they finally amended that gray area. When you go and request your salvoconducto, they do say that you have to book an appointment. Now, in Bogota, most likely there are no more appointments until sometime in December, probably even January. So in this case, they now communicate and they now say that if you're against the wall here, you're approaching October 21st here, you can find an appointment, head immediately to the Centro Facilitador de Migración Colombia in whichever city you are. Centro Facilitador is basically their office.
Okay. Have you passed by the one in Bogota? Because I'm going to take a wild guess. Well, obviously, there'll be a lot of foreigners in Medellin as well, but in Bogota, probably more, just because obviously it's the most populated city in the country and probably has more foreigners. Are there big queues outside? So, like, if somebody is in that situation that they have to go and get their salvoconducto before the 21st, are they going to be waiting in line for hours? Or do you know?
They might. I mean, so many things are happening with this pandemic that there's, there are so many unpredictable things that are happening that I'm fairly sure at some point it's just going to fill up. So, as of now, no, there are. I wouldn't consider them to be big queues, at least by Colombian standards. It is being well managed per se. I mean, you do have to wash your hands before you go in, and they have a sink there for you to wash your hands. They clean you. You basically they have all the hygiene protocols already very well set up, and it's not packed. Now, am I expecting it to get packed as we get closer to October 21st? We will see. I hope not. I hope everybody takes up their time and they do things with enough time, but we can't always count on that. So as of now, there are no big lines. I've been there, but as it starts counting down to October 21st or even November 1st, because that's also interesting. Those whose visa have expired have to get a salvoconducto by October 21st, but those who are on tourist permit, their deadline for a salvoconducto is November 1st.
Oh, really? Why the difference? No reason. Okay, they've just spread it out. Okay, that's.
It really depends.
Yeah. So what about somebody then, Camilo, who has begun, we'll say, the process of renewing a visa or looking for a visa, and that when you pay your study fee, it lasts for 30 days. So let's say they submitted an application yesterday, and we're recording this on what date is today? The 8th of October. So they submitted on the 7th. So technically they have until the 7th of November, thereabouts. But they may not get an answer until a few weeks later, or there may be more documents required from La Cancilleria, so the whole thing will drag on. Are they entitled to go and apply for a salvoconducto while their visa application is live?
Well, if there's something we can count on right now is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is definitely asking for more documents than what is actually summarized in their immigration resolution, which is the 6045 of 2017.
Uh-huh.
So and they can. I mean, accordingly to that resolution, they can ask for whatever paperwork they want.
Well, I used to make the
Um,
joke, Camilo, that they could ask somebody what they've been eating for breakfast for the last 6 months, and
they
you
could,
know,
they could, and they probably have. I mean,
yeah.
I've heard of cases where, especially for spouse visas, where they request a lot of information that becomes personal. But then again, uh, where don't they? You know, when you're requesting a spouse visa. Um, but in this sense, the Cancilleria, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has by law, and that's on the resolution that I already mentioned. It is stated there on the article, if I'm not mistaken, that's the Article 77. If not, then I'm probably going to get sued for saying what I shouldn't. But,
Well, I don't think
anyway,
too many people are going to be looking these up, especially foreigners, in fairness, because these things come with
I
yeah.
definitely would. So you
Okay.
guys know what you're standing against here.
Yeah.
It does say so in that same resolution that they have 5 business days to answer with any concept. And that's where you have to bear in mind. A concept could be accepted, could be what they call admitted, it could be inadmitted, which is technically, upload your visa again. They could require more information, which is the requirement or requerimiento, or they could definitely reject you, which is going to ban you from requesting a visa for another 6 months. And then there's also something else that should be said by now, and we're October 8th. The application could last up to 30 days. However, you do have to have a concept once you paid for your study within 5 business days. Should that not happen, they're already breaching one of their articles. So you should communicate it back again with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and let them know that they've breached. Once you do that, they're probably going to escalate your case and you'll have an answer within a few days.
Interesting you say that, Camilo, because well, you know a few things about my own situation at the moment. I'm not going to go into great detail on that. But when I submitted a visa application last month, I never got an email, which you normally get an email telling me that they were requiring more documentation. I had to go on and check the thing. Should you get an email sent to the email address registered with your application?
Well,
By
here's the
that
thing.
article that you mentioned.
Well, here's the thing. My guess is this is their CRM software, which is El CITAC. Has been undergoing many updates over the past few months, actually, where they're trying to fix, for example, notification mistakes, where they're trying to fix accounting matters as well. Before, there was a time in which they wouldn't give you a receipt for your payment. So that already happened. They've been updating to get back on track. So in that case, I mean, you should have, of course, been notified, but their CRM, in a way, it is kind of notified. And you did your due diligence and you went online and you checked. But I mean, definitely, it becomes a gap. And I would definitely move this into a legal, let's say, a litigation legal area, in which I don't expect nor advise anybody to actually go into. Um, there's a gap there, if you want to say it so. They didn't notify you because they were updating their system, but their system in a way was notified. Thankfully, you did your due diligence and you actually found out. But there's probably many people that didn't do that.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's what I'd be concerned about, that people kind of forget, because in my previous experience for all the other visas that I've applied for, and I've applied for a fair few since 2013, is that you get an email, and I just didn't get it. It sounds kind of like, Camilo, and I know you don't work for the Cancilleria or Migración, but it's kind of like computer says no, or it was a computer fault. You know what they say, a bad workman blames his tools. But anyway.
In a way, it was a glitch.
Yeah.
If that's what we want to work into, I really hope there aren't many people in this boat, but it did happen, and it has happened over the past few months where, they're undergoing updates, maintenance, and so on, and you expect these inconveniences to happen.
You've been dealing with visas for years now, Camilo. There's, we'll say, maybe almost a conspiracy theory going around at the moment that Colombia doesn't want foreigners here or whatever, there seems to be a lot of people being rejected or inadmitted, as you said, inadmitida, visas inadmitidas, they would say, so deemed inadmissible, I guess is how I would put it into English. People being turned down for residency or found that they were missing documentation, all this kind of stuff. And it obviously on these Facebook groups, you don't get people they don't tend to write in saying, oh, I got my visa approved. So you tend to hear the negative cases, not the positive cases. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of things going on at both Migración and La Cancillería. What's your take on it? Are we in a weird time where Colombia is just saying no to a lot of people? And why, if that's the case?
I think we're in adapting times. I don't really think that there's an agenda here against foreigners. But I do believe that there's been a change per se in the documentation that's being requested, and this is all done in matters to make sure that those who are applying are actually their health care is covered, because if there's anything we have to take care of right now is our health. There's also the fact that there's a whole bunch of repressed work, especially at Migración Colombia. Where we're talking on, trying to work our way up to a cédula, and there may be an idea to fill that time up so we don't rush into Migración and basically break the system. There is also a need per se, and this does have to do with the pandemic, where there are many people that just weren't dealing, or they weren't doing their social security work here, their EPS and so on, or they weren't covered. So they just want to make sure that is covered. They want to make sure that those who stay really, really have the means to stay and really are covered to do so. Of course, it's created quite a few headaches. There's been so many inconveniences for so many. But I think it's just a matter of adjusting, We've been talking about this time as the time in which we reinvent ourselves. Well, Cancillería is doing the same, and so is Migración. So what I would, bear with it for a little bit. I'm fairly sure that everything within some time is just going to be as clear as ice. But right now, of course, I mean, there's a great deal to organize and a great deal to try to actually adapt to in matters of turning in documentation.
Related question for, again, a guy who deals in all of this. We had the high-profile case of Dominic Wolf, an influencer and tour operator here in Colombia, although he ran off to Germany when the pandemic started. You can check out a video on my YouTube about that. But do you think his case helps people who are in limbo land at the moment, or maybe have been turned down for residency or had a visa deemed inadmissible, or it's not going to make any difference to anyone else? How do you think that one is going to play out? Because just to say, the La Cancillería have kind of done an about turn and offered him a special permission to come into the country to sort out his affairs.
Well, here's what I know in matters of what he said, of what the media has said, and what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a public announcement actually said. So just to make this matter clear, let's start by the media and him, of course. So what actually was said by him and the media, but in his video, he actually shows a screenshot of what happened. His visa was inadmitted, which is a concept. Now, what the media has said, and what he said, of course, in his video, is that his visa got rejected. So there's a concept difference there. He can reapply for a visa. He can reapply for his visa, depending the same kind of visa that he requested probably, as long as he turns in the right documentation. That is an inadmission. What the media is saying, what he's saying is that the visa was rejected. Now, a rejection is a ban. You are banned for 6 months to be able to get a visa in Colombia, and you cannot request another visa all over again until those 6 months have expired. That is not true. That is misinformation. So I think it has helped in a matter of trying to clear the concepts that Cancillería uses. However, what I know in matters of what the Cancilleria has said publicly about this is that he was requesting a residence in which he was claiming he already had the time and the continuity to become a Colombian resident. Once that was analyzed based on the documentation that he uploaded, they came to a concept that he was not eligible for that kind of visa. So that's what we know. I cannot really say any more further, much rather because I haven't seen the paperwork. All I've seen is the concept, which he posted publicly on his video, and the announcement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So basically, that's all I can say about it. But of course, I mean, in matters of information, I think that people have actually reached out and tried to keep informed much better before they made more mistakes.
Yeah, and well, I do know, outside of the original statement from the Cancilleria, then they said, they would give him this special permission to re-enter the country. But anyway, there's been a lot of media.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't need special permission. He doesn't need a visa to re-enter Colombia.
Which brings me,
Exactly. So if that makes any sense, he hasn't been rejected. He hasn't been deported. There's no special. He's a tourist whenever he comes back, or even if he applies for a migrant visa right after that, he could actually get a visa before re-entering the country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm sure we'll all be at the airport to welcome him back when he comes.
I surely hope so.
Of course, I've got my ticket booked already. It's by ticket only. But that's nice to bring us on. And I know this isn't exactly your area, but for those who might be listening or watching, if you're watching on YouTube, abroad and are thinking of visiting Colombia, Colombia is open for business, basically, for tourists now.
Yes. Of course, I mean, there's a matter of protocols that you have to follow. You have to have a PCR test taken, and you have to have the certificate of the result of that PCR test within 96 hours previous to your flight. You need to also register on MigCheck by Migración Colombia within 24 hours of your flight. And you have to basically, once you come in, keep all of the security protocols and so on kept by the Ministry of Health and Migración Colombia. Now, you also have to be aware that this is a PCR test. It's not a fast test. It's not a blood test. It's a PCR test given by, and the certificate is given by a certified lab with good reputation per se, because many people have actually been turned back to their countries because they haven't presented the right test. You want to avoid as much ambiguity here as you can.
Yeah, and I would say if people are on Twitter or even Facebook and search Migración Colombia, they have a nice little infographic which explains it in kind of 4 steps. It's like, you want to visit Colombia, and they have the 4 steps, and it's all pretty clear, even if you don't speak Spanish. I think it might have English on it anyway. So it's pretty clear. Now, of course, that brings on the other question: would you want to visit in pandemic time? And there's talk about Colombia entering a second wave in mid-November and all that kind of stuff. But that's for another chat, Camilo. Is there anything you want to say? Is there anything we've left out of importance in all of this? I'm trying to think of maybe some other areas that people would have questions. Of course, if they do, they can contact us using, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment on the video or contact us. If you're watching on the podcast, you can use the message facility there. But is there anything that springs to mind before we wrap up?
Well, I just really would like for people to actually, consult before they initiate any kind of immigration process on their own. I do understand. I mean, this is public information. This is not something you need a lawyer for. However, Colombian is highly bureaucratic. And that being so, sometimes the information gets somewhere lost in translation. It's happened, especially where Migración has actually launched public announcements, for example, migration certificates being issued online, and then they don't. So my idea, let's say that I would like people to consult beforehand, consult with an expert before you do so. And then if you want to take your process by yourself, then do so. Of course, I mean, you're welcome to this and open to, this is a citizen service per se. So yeah, of course, you're more than welcome to do so, but try consulting beforehand, because then, not knowing, not researching, not announcing, or not going into the internet and finding out more information about it is just going to come up with more headaches, more inconveniences, and of course, as well, sometimes, and this happens when you're a public figure, more misinformation. So, consult before you start your process, and then start it with once you have a whole bunch of information on it.
Yeah, it's actually very good advice, because I think some of the longer termers, and I put myself in this bracket, we were used to the process being straightforward, very simple, easy, submit your documents, you get your visa. Things have changed. So I think people who've just arrived or in the last couple of years are probably more used to the process being a little bit more difficult, perhaps we'll say matching international standard, whereas maybe 5 years ago it was a breeze, and it's not. So that's actually very good advice. So I think people who are maybe a little bit arrogant about it, they'd want to think about it a little bit more. And of course, your services are available, Camilo. Yeah.
Yes, they are, of course.
But what were you going to say? Sorry.
We will be, of course. Yes, they are. We will be posting my contact information, on this podcast. So if you have a question, or if you're in trouble or anything like that, just shoot us an email, give us a call, and we'll be able to help out.
Yeah, if you're in trouble, just raise that Camilo sign, like the bat signal, and Camilo will come calling from his bat cave, which it almost looks like there. Anyway, guys, if you're listening, I was going to say, if you're listening on the podcast, they'll have no idea what I'm on about, but you can check in on the YouTube video. But talking about context, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter with the handle @WA Corrigan, or my Facebook page is at Wrong Way Corrigan blog. Camilo, appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a hectic schedule and a newborn baby as well to take care of, and lots of things going on there. So we do appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions. But guys, until the next time on Wrong Way's Colombia cast, it's ciao ciao from me, and ciao ciao from Camilo, I guess.
A pleasure to you all. Thank you for tuning in.